One of the biggest political surprises of the year happened just last week when Louisiana elected a Democrat as its next governor. John Bel Edwards will be the first Democratic governor in all of the Deep South since former Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco left office in 2008. Political insiders had expected Republican Senator David Vitter to cruise to an easy victory, so much so that Democrats who were more prominent than Edwards decided against running because their chances appeared to be so slim. But Edwards, a formerly obscure state legislator, surprised everyone by winning the open primary last month with 40% of the votes, and then he soundly beat Vitter in the runoff by 12 points. How in the world did he do it? Here with us to help explain is John Rowley, the media strategist for John Bel Edwards' successful gubernatorial campaign. So, John, how'd y'all do it?
Well, it's interesting. Well, we worked for an independent expenditure, not directly for his campaign, but two of the keys were the candidate got a very early start. He started running 2 and 3 years out, which I think is a model for other candidates in very competitive, if not red, areas. And also, there were a number of independent expenditure groups that came together early and helped him early in that primary and in the runoff that were key. And then also, you know, you had David Vitter as an opponent. I mean, he had big problems going into the race, and then a huge scandal broke by an investigative blogger that blew things up. And then another thing that I think is also a model for Democrats in competitive areas, there was a candidate with a great profile, military veteran, Army Ranger, West Point, and also he was pro-life, pro-gun, which mitigated some of the late attacks that Vitter and his super PACs tried to volley at him.
All right, so I want to, just for folks who weren't following this race, and I know this isn't actually an ad that your group did, but this really was a kind of extraordinary ad that points out, I think, kind of the candidate nature as opposed to the ideological nature of this race. So let's just take a look at what I think is one of the best ads of the year.
The choice for governor couldn't be more clear. John Bel Edwards, who answered our country's call and served as a ranger in the 82nd Airborne Division. Or David Vitter, who answered a prostitute's call minutes after he skipped a vote honoring 28 soldiers who gave their lives in defense of our freedom. David Vitter chose prostitutes over patriots. Now, the choice is yours.
Man, I mean, I constantly hardly can believe that even happened in the world. So let me ask you this, John. So given that you can make that someone can make an ad, prostitutes over patriots in this case, is this actually a story that can be bigger? Is this something about how Democrats can run in the South, or is this really just like if you're running against a guy who answered a prostitute's call instead of, taking a vote on
Democrats didn't beat him in 2010 when a lot of this information was out there. So there's certainly things to replicate. The profile of the candidate, forming of third parties to match all of the Republican third parties, being very aggressive against Vitter, and I think that ad needed a disclaimer of strong words to follow probably before it aired. And then the other thing is, in the organization we're involved with, Louisiana Families First, was also very focused on motivating African American voters, and the field program and black turnout was higher in the jungle primary and in the runoff, as they call it in Louisiana. So,
so hold on, Zephyr, I'm going to let you in on the money piece. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm thrilled that Edwards won, but this is not a good development for Democrats in the deep, small d Democratic sense or the big D Democratic sense, because outside money funders are going to be hedge funders. They are not going to be, in general, be focused on sort of core Democratic populist issues, and it sort of speaks to the rise of personal politics instead of politics that is actually about roads, bridges, schools, and the basics in our society. So I don't think there's any celebration in the use of outside groups, even though I'm thrilled with it.
Hold on, John, I want to come to you real quick, because it just occurred to me, as somebody who's lived in New Orleans, that when you say jungle primary, I hear something different than what the rest of the world might have just heard when you said it.
Right.
Can you please explain that for a second?
Well, I mean, this race proves, like Louisiana's proved a lot of times, it's one of the more fascinating places to watch politics. And in Louisiana, kind of like California's primary, Democrats and Republicans are on the ballot together in the first race and in the second race. So there's not a conventional Democratic primary. So you could have gone in and voted for the D or the R. And so there were 3 strong Republican candidates and John Bel Edwards. And In terms of what was said about the independent expenditures, in this case anyway, that wasn't really the case in terms of a lot of the people that were supporting some of these efforts. And I think, I guess as progressives and on the Democratic side, we've got a choice to make. Do we want to unilaterally disarm, or do we want to be competitive in terms of spending? I mean, Vitter's super PAC still dramatically outspent the Democratic side of things, but we're able to prevail.
And as a strategist, a win is a win, so I hand it over. That was a well-done race from Edwards' side. However, it's very interesting to see in 2015 that race happening when you see nationally where the progressive movement on the Democratic side is moving. Don't forget, I wonder how Governor-elect Edwards is going to do, being a very, he doubled down on being pro-life.
And
he doubled on being pro-gun. He moved very much away from President Obama.
No, see, I think he didn't. I think he ran. No, I actually think
saying I am not like national Democrats.
That was right. He did say I'm not like national Democrats, but unlike so many of the Southern Dems who in the midterms ran hard against the president, they actually in this case recognized that black voters, I mean, when you look at, John, am I wrong that African-American turnout in this off-year election was one of the highest that we've seen in an off-year election?
Yeah, it was 4 or 5 points up by our best estimation.
That's great political strategy. And I give that. That is great strategy. That's good outreach. There were some great ads done in that race. But it wasn't necessarily saying, just because you do outreach in those communities doesn't mean you're saying I am with the president's agenda. It doesn't mean that you are with the president. It means you are doing a very smart retail campaign.
There's also the Bobby Jindal factor. I know it's one of your favorite people. They tied so successfully to Bobby Jindal, who has like a 20% approval rating. Even the majority of Republicans don't like him. That's sort of flipping the script, because in the past Republicans like to tie candidates to President Obama. This time they did it with such a massively unpopular governor.
And you know, I guess the main thing I just want to take away from this, John Rowley in Nashville, Tennessee, thank you for joining us, but it is the point, and I've heard you make it a million times, you got to run to win, and Democrats have to actually challenge in the South instead of just continuing to just give over all of those races. Thank you to Susan Del Percio and Zephyr Teachout. Dorian and Raul are sticking around a little bit longer. Still to come this morning, the first trial for the officers charged in the death of Freddie Gray is about to begin, and up next, we want to get you the latest on the suspected gunman in the shooting in the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood.